Throw a little distortion on there and, well, actually to my surprise, you get some pretty Doom-sounding stuff right out the gate. So I got in touch with David Levy. Hi. Question. What if Suicide Mission from Mass Effect 2 was made using sounds and techniques from the Doom Eternal soundtrack? Well, now there's an answer, because I, Geoffrey, have made argent metal that also makes you cry? How is that even possible? Both the Mass Effect series and soundtrack are a work of art, much like Keena's masterpiece made for this video's thumbnail. All of her links are in the description below, and you should go follow her, so when she auctions off the signed prints, you can be the first to make a $10 million offer. And since this video came out a couple of days after the release of Mass Effect Legendary Edition, you'll be happy to know that I picked it up and got a few hours of play in. And before you ask, yes, full renegade. And yes, I made my character look kind of like Bron from Game of Thrones. As you can probably imagine, my Shepard is either killing, swindling, or sleeping with everyone he comes across. So while the music of Doom is rhythmic, atonal, and aggressive, the music of Mass Effect is more like ambient, heroic, or uplifting even, but it's never in your face. Merging these two styles, it's gonna be tough. But you know what? I think we got this. As always, I've got some downloadables for you to take home, which I'll talk about at the end of this video, but until then, let's get to know Jack Wall, the composer for Mass Effect 1 and 2. If you're into any non-Doom shooters like Call of Duty, for example, then you've probably heard a Jack Wall soundtrack. This guy is an industry powerhouse whose credits include the first two Mass Effects, a bunch of Call of Duty games, Jade Empire, Lost Planet 3, even some TV work like Rain and Emerald City. There's a lot of information out there that you can read up on, so for now, let's just focus on the Mass Effect soundtracks. Quick side note, I feel like I'm subconsciously choosing games for these Doom videos where the main character has a space helmet on. Like first Halo, now Mass Effect, and then there's all these that I've gotten suggestions for. Forget argent metal, guys. This is gonna be helmet metal if I don't put a few JRPGs in between. Anyway, back to Jack Wall. I checked out a couple of his interviews, and it seems like the more you listen to AAA game composers talk about their career, the more you hear similarities between them. Stuff kind of like this.
Sometimes you have like a year or more to write the score.
I worked on Doom for about 2 years, almost 2 years.
The goal with when you're writing a score is not to be noticed, really. You're just supposed to be felt.
But when on a video game project, you talk more about feelings than you do about genres.
At the very beginning of something, and no one knows what you're going to do. Really, it's about sitting down and saying, I'm going to sit here for like 2 hours and play around with some sounds.
So we spent the first couple of months just experimenting with synthesizers and coming up with different synth sounds and seeing how far we could push synths.
And don't even get me started on how they land gigs, or how they interface with the rest of the studio, or how they compile a team of assistants for these projects. There's a lot going on at the professional level that I often forget about. So according to Jack, what makes Suicide Mission so important to Mass Effect 2 is the fact that it was the first song he worked on for the game, even though it plays near the end. The style and emotion of the piece set the tone for the rest of the game, which is starting to incorporate more orchestral music alongside the established 80s retro synth stuff they were doing for the first Mass Effect. Basically everything about the arrangement and instrumentation of Mass Effect 2 is different from Doom, except for maybe that Jack and Mick both own a keyboard. Suicide Mission is much closer in style to something you'd hear in film or TV, that is, meant to be used in a specific emotional moment. Which, for contrast, Doom Eternal's soundtrack, if you remember, contains the emotional equivalent of a sliding scale from punching a little to punching a lot. To do this right, I figure it's probably better to get an expert opinion on the contrast here. So I got in touch with David Levy, the guy you know for not only the Doom Eternal Ancient Gods DLC, but also for a huge amount of top-tier orchestral and hybrid work. I asked him what it was like switching his mindset from writing orchestral music to Doom music, and he replied with the following. Switching from orchestral to Doom-style score was, in one simple word, liberating. No longer having to plan things around an orchestra and having literally endless sonic possibilities to explore was incredibly exciting. And the aggressive, over-the-top processing that's expected and in a way required to make the genre work was the cherry on top. That makes a huge amount of sense to me, and it's great to hear from someone close to the game. If you haven't, go follow David on YouTube because he's posting up some fun sound design goodies right now. So, unlike a AAA game's multi-year timeline, I had about a week to make this song, so I set a couple of goals. 1. Don't lose the emotional value of the original Suicide Mission song. 2. Use heavy guitars and synths to add a little bit of kick-ass on top of the desperation without cannibalizing the whole thing. And 3. Go full Doom for like a hot second. Alright team, let's go put Shepard in the Praetor suit! Well, that was fast. Here's the finished product. I'm not gonna lie, I spent all my time getting this done quickly and I kind of forgot to record in between.
I think the best way to tell a story is by starting at the end.
There's plenty of cool stuff to show you, so let's dive in. The first challenge I had here was figuring out what melodies from Suicide Mission to keep and what to remove. Take a typical Doom song, and you basically have the bass layer and the top melody layer, and the rest is noise or drums, but melodically that's about it. On the other hand, Jack Wall wrote the song with a bass, a middle chords layer, a repeating top layer, and some harmonies. And that's just the first half because they all change up for the second half. And that fact alone is what can take all of the Doom essence out of this cover. So, just like the Final Fantasy covers I did, I needed to strip the song down to its bare minimum. We gotta keep it recognizable, but remove anything non-essential. I narrowed the chorus down to 3 layers. There's the bass layer, which I give to the guitars. The mids layer, which is a synth that blends in nicely. And a top layer, which stands out as the main melody. I sincerely hope that that's all we need. Oh, and I found a crazy use for my Doom compressor. I have these little spaces in between the guitar rhythm that have some quiet sounds in between there. But what if they weren't quiet? To find out, I put the Doom compressor on this entire group and voila! Those quiet bits are ramping up loud as the compressor gets to the spaces. Oh, and I might be turning this compressor into a VST soon, so that'll be cool. Speaking of this group, I needed something to turn the whole low end into a single unit. Typically, the way to do something like that is to apply an effect to the whole group, like if you were to paint everything one color. I used a little tremolo to emulate the crunchy texture of distortion that might come from mixing things too loud. But of course, because it's fake, it sounds nice and controlled as opposed to being actually too loud. It's pretty well known that a lot of Doom sound design comes from kick drums being used in weird ways. So I booted up Kick 2 and turned up the velocity detection so I could play kicks with different intensities. Throw a little distortion on there and, well, actually to my surprise, you get some pretty Doom sounding stuff right out the gate. At this point, we're pretty familiar with the fact that hardware played a big role in the Doom soundtrack, but I couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to do essentially the same thing with software. That is, create the Ableton equivalent of plugging in patch cables and turning knobs to see what happens. There's, a little bit of setup involved, but it's actually very doable. Ableton 11 comes with these MIDI and parameter tools that I can use to hook up to any effect I want. Let's say I start with this riff I totally made up on the spot and didn't plagiarize. Now, if I want to create, say, a randomized distortion effect, I can use this random setting on the LFO. It feels less fun to click map, to patch stuff together, but the trade-off is that everything is precisely controllable. In Suicide Mission, I made this little guy by doing some of that creative patching. If you're really into hardware, it looks like Native Instruments Reactor is a little more hands-on with this kind of thing. It has like actual patch cables and stuff, but I still need to dive into it personally. Speaking of diving in, ready to hear how it turned out? On a scale of Doom kickassery to Mass Effect heroism, I think this one is squarely in between, but I'll let you be the judge. Without further ado, Suicide Mission in the style of Doom Eternal. Enjoy! Did you jam out? How about cry? Blood punch a Citadel reporter, perhaps? Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I said there would be downloadables, and you betcha I've put all the stems and a deep dive behind-the-scenes video up for sale on my website for less money than an entire rotisserie chicken. And, unlike that chicken, these stems are always hot. I used DistroKid to get these songs on Spotify and Apple Music, so they'll be up soon after this video's release. But now you can listen on SoundCloud, YouTube, and of course Bandcamp with the option to download for free, or if you're feeling extra emotional, you can pay a few bucks for the track, but no, that's always optional. I have a really good cover coming up next, so follow me on Twitter or Instagram for some hints. But until then, I've been Geoffrey Day, you've been a perfect human being, and I hope you'll come back for the next video. See ya!